You're listening to Docs Outside the Box, episode 36.
Welcome to Docs Outside the Box podcast. This is your official show, looking inside the minds of cutting-edge and innovative doctors. Think you'll find these stories in any medical textbook? Sorry. You're getting real live insight from men and women pushing the envelope beyond medicine. Ordinary doctors doing extraordinary things. Let's start now with your host, Dr. Nee Darko.
This episode is brought to you by Set for Life Insurance. Protect yourself against life setbacks with Set for Life Insurance. Set for Life Insurance gets you disability and life insurance at a reduced cost with their exclusive discounts. Now that's why I use them. Visit www.setforlifeinsurance.com and tell them Dr. Darko sent you. Hey docs, are you looking to learn how to become a physician leader? Then Physician CEO is for you. Physician CEO is an accelerated business immersion program designed for physicians and developed by MBA faculty from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. The 2018 program begins this January, so learn more at www.physician-ceo.com/DOTB. What's good, everyone? Welcome to the movement, the revolution, the podcast, Docs Outside the Box. I am the Doc Outside the Box, your host, Dr. Nee Darko, and thank you very much for coming back for another episode. Look, I know you probably are like, why is he calling this a revolution? I'm calling this a movement. I'm calling this a revolution because, look, for the past year and a half, you all have tuned in nonstop, consistently, and have either emailed me, tweeted, sent me a message on Facebook, Instagrammed me. And you know I love the gram. I love the gram. But you all have reached out to me in so many different ways, telling me how, one, you either enjoy the show, you enjoy the guests and how they're pushing the limits on medicine and how we think about physicians and how they treat people and how they are doing things outside of the box. And you've also told me about your stories about how you all, the audience, are thinking outside the box. It is something that I wasn't expecting. It's something that I never anticipated. And yeah, this is a wave that is getting bigger and bigger. So that's why I'm calling this the movement, the revolution. And you all continue to listen. And I hope you all continue to write back to me, send me feedback, continue to send me guests so that I know that, hey, people are listening. People love this. And as long as you continue to write me, I promise to each and every one of you that I will reach back to you and I will contact you back in some form or fashion. So to all of you all who are listening, once again, I want to say thank you so much for being a part of this movement, because where I started with Docs Outside the Box, about a year and a half ago, it's definitely grown to an area in which I just was not expecting it. So thank you so much. It also is really good to get help from people because, look, let's be honest, right? I know the prototype, right? I am type A, which the majority of you all are. If you're a physician or if you're in med school or if you're trying to be a doctor, like, we are all type A type personalities. We're competitive as hell. I mean, we think we know it all, but in the world of what I'm entering into, podcasting and becoming a better podcaster and better interviewer, I decided to go out and ask for help from people who are experts in this area. And I had a really good breakthrough session this past weekend. And I'm just going to let you know that the show is going to get better. The way in which I reach out to you all is going to get better. So just be aware of that. I just want to let you all know about that. So our next segment is we're going to quickly do a 5-star review. So I'm going to do 2 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. Remember, that's the best way. Whether you listen to my podcast or you listen to anybody else's podcast, the best way to let me know that you appreciate this podcast is just to go take about 45 seconds, go on Apple Podcasts and leave me a review. The easiest way is to go to my website, www.docsotb, that's D as in dog, OCSOT as in Tom, B as in boy.com. And just go to any one of the episodes, click on it, and on the bottom of the show notes, you'll see links to subscribe to either Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or even Stitcher Radio, and just click on Apple Podcasts. It'll take you right there. 45 seconds, leave a review, boom, we're done. So the first review I'm going to read is from Night AJ, and this person says, amazing podcast. Love the host and the podcast. Keep up with the great interviews. Night AJ, thank you so much for leaving that 5-star review. I really appreciate it. The next one is from Dr. A84. The title is The Inspiration I Need. And it reads, I've been subscribed to Docs Outside the Box for a while now, and I can honestly say it has been a godsend. Damn. Okay. As a physician with a heart for entrepreneurship, it is refreshing to hear the stories of other physicians who have not limited their careers to just clinical medicine. What I especially enjoy is how engaging Dr. Darko is on the episodes, and the episodes sound like real conversations, and you can tell he has a true passion for what he's doing. A+ for not sounding robotic either. Keep up the good work. Dr. A84, thank you so much. If I could do a fist pump through the podcast, I would, but I really, really appreciate it. Those are really great reviews. So once again, everyone, please take a moment after this podcast is done. Go to my website, www.docsotb.com, and go click on one of the episodes or any of the episodes, and you'll see at the bottom of the show notes, there'll be a link for Apple Podcasts. Click on that. Please just leave a quick review. It really helps a lot. Not only does it help with the algorithms, but it helps with the podcast moving up in the rankings, and it makes it that much more easier for other listeners to find out about this show. It continues to grow, and I can continue to get the bomb.com guests. So thank you very much. So listen, the other thing too, before we get into our next guest, is I want to say, look, continue to reach out to me. Obviously, I always am quick to get back to you all. The best way to reach out to me is through Twitter or through Instagram. So if you want to tweet me, make sure you tweet me at DocsOTB. That's DOCSOTB on Twitter. And just tweet me that you're listening to this. Take a screenshot of yourself or a screenshot take a selfie of yourself and then take a screenshot of the screen if you want to, of your favorite podcast app, and send it to me. Or you can do it in IG, which I think is the easiest. Do it through Instagram, and my username is @NiiPDarko, NII, as in Paul, DARKO, and that's the best way to reach out to me. That's the quickest way for me to get back to you all. So on to my next guest. My next guest is a big one. My next guest is Diane Gardner. She's not a doctor, but she is also not your average CPA. And I'm being very truthful about that. She is a tax coach. Her expertise is in tax planning. And what that means basically is, look, you know how you go and you talk to your CPA around February, March. You hand them all of your paperwork, your receipts, your W-2s, your 1099s if you're a if you're an independent contractor, what have you. And then when it's time for to pay your taxes, it's like, well, this is how much you owe, and like there's this huge tax bill. And then your CPA says, well, if you had told me this, I could have saved you this, I could have saved you that, I could have done this. She had said this, Craig had said that. You know what I'm saying? After a while, you look at your CPA and it's like, look, why didn't you tell me all this stuff? And he's like, well, I mean, if you had told me earlier. So look, that type of experience, I think, is all too common. I've experienced that multiple times. And with Diane, she is someone who definitely is going to work with you from the get-go. She prides herself in working with her clients throughout the year so as to help them make decisions that will help reduce their taxes, help them save money. Her goal basically is to make sure that entrepreneurs across the United States are paying the least amount of taxes they legally should. And make sure I underline legally, okay? That they legally should. So she coaches entrepreneurs. She coaches, people personally for taxes. And she brags and she says that she has saved her clients over $1 million to date. So we literally have the real deal on this show. And she's here. She's going to talk about a lot of different things related to being a doc outside the box in terms of how you get paid and what type of entity that you should be making. Now, we've talked about it before on a previous episode with Dave Dennison, but this time we're going to talk about it from a forward-looking standpoint, from a tax burden standpoint. So you want to make sure you get your notes ready, get your notebook ready, get your pen ready, because this is going to be very, very important. There's going to be a lot of information that you may want to write down and go back and research. But other things that we're going to talk about is she's going to talk about her new book, which is called The 10 Most Expensive Tax Mistakes That Cost Medical Professionals Thousands. And it's a really good read. It's very easy to read. I read it myself. It's very, very easy to read. But other things that we're going to talk about are, why doctors are more vulnerable than other entrepreneurs to paying more in taxes, right? Now you guys are listening, right? The common tax deductions that doctors don't take. We're going to learn about what is a deductible. Should you choose an LLC or limited liability corporation versus an S corp? How 1099 doctors can maximize their tax efficiency. I mean, we're going to talk about a lot of different things. So before we get into the next episode, I really quickly just want to leave a note and let you all know that I have hired Diane Gardner. I work with her. So just so you know, full disclosure, we work together, but I ain't going to front. She has saved me thousands of dollars. So make sure you stay till the end of the episode. There's going to be a great giveaway that you don't want to miss out on. And without further ado, I present to you Diane Gardner. Welcome back to another episode of Docs Outside the Box. I am really excited for you all to be introduced to and to hear the knowledge from Diane Gardner, author of 10 Most Expensive Tax Mistakes That Cost Medical Professionals Thousands. Diane, welcome to the show. I've been looking forward to having you on the show for about a year now. It's good to have you on.
Well, Nee, I'm so happy to be on your program, and I'm so excited over the success that you're having with this program.
Well, thank you very much. And before we get started, we do, just for full disclosure, everyone, I do have to put it out there that Diane Gardner is my CPA, my tax professional extraordinaire. So before we get too far into it, I just want to just put full disclosure that I am a client of hers, and I am not afraid to say that I've been able to see very good results with her. And because of that, I wanted to have you on the show so you can talk about all the things that you do, the things that you can do to help medical professionals help reduce their tax burden.
This should be fun, and it's a subject that I know we're both passionate about.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So before we get too much into the nitty gritty, Diane, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Like, where are you from, your training, things like that?
Well, I'm from the little tiny small town in northern Idaho.
Idaho.
Where we get to complain about the traffic if it takes us, 6 or 8 cars before we can pull out on the street.
Diane, what time zone are you
compared to
at?
what you get to do? I know.
Are you
Life
mountain
is
time
stressful
zone?
here.
Are you mountain time zone?
I'm in Pacific time zone.
Pacific time zone. Okay, got you. Okay, so you're in Idaho. Right.
Yes, I'm in Idaho. I am an accountant, but not just an accountant. I'm a certified tax coach. And what that does is it allows me to be a superhero to my clients and save them money on their taxes. It's money that they would have given to the government just because they don't know what they don't know. And so to date, we are up to about $1.5 million in tax savings. And it's fun watching those numbers grow every time we get to work with another physician or other business type person and help them save some more money.
Now, how long have you been working with physicians now?
Oh, a couple years. Yeah, this was a fairly new area that we kind of stumbled into as I had a few physicians reaching out to me and saying, can you help? And we went, sure. And so since then, we've been learning lots and lots about the medical community and trying to increase my skills so that we can make sure that we're meeting your needs. And, just having a blast working with several physicians now.
Well, I found you through listening to, I'm a big fan of podcasts. So I was listening to the Listen Money Matters podcast about a year ago. And I heard you on there, and you were actually helping one of the hosts with their tax situation. And he lived all the way in New Jersey, in Hoboken, New Jersey. And he had nothing but phenomenal things to say about you. And at that time, I was going through some tax situations. Like, I wasn't getting audited or anything like that, but I just always felt as if there was something more that I can do with my taxes. And I reached out to you. We met over Skype, and the rest is history. So that's how we met. So one thing that I wanted to ask you is what differentiates you from the typical CPA or tax professional, or the person who's at H&R Block? What's the big difference in between what you do and what they do?
Well, the biggest difference is they record history. And that's where most accountants or most tax preparers really excel and specialize. They'll tell you what happened yesterday, last year, last month, last quarter, 2 years ago. They'll tell you all that information. But I get to help you plan the future. And so that's where it gets fun, because now we're not just driving by looking in the rearview mirror. We're laying out a plan ahead of us, and then we're helping you implement that plan so that you're accomplishing your dreams and your goals and your desires and saving taxes all at the same time.
Okay.
So that's what makes me different.
So, and that's a good point, because I've heard that all the time in terms of looking in the rearview mirror, because every tax professional that I had prior to you, it's always been the usual, okay, here's how much you owe in taxes. And then I would say, well, but I did X, Y, Z. Like, how come that didn't change anything? And they would say, well, if you had told me that during the year, then maybe we could have changed direction, or this is what you did, and maybe next year we can do that. And it just never occurs. And I can definitely say, with you, you definitely helped me and my wife, and you helped our business, kind of just change things and change our perspective looking forward in terms of just, in comparison to just always looking backwards. So that's something that I really was attracted with you, is that you kind of help us move forward, and you help people kind of plan ahead and make and look for any issues that may come, and kind of move, in another way without me talking so much. But you get my point.
Right. Well, I think so many of us operate in the little area of life that we don't know what we don't know. So you didn't know that you needed to tell your accountant or your tax preparer certain information because you just didn't know you need to tell them that. And I think if we look at our lives, we can find that scenario in almost every aspect of life. We don't know what we don't know. And so if you can find somebody who will come along behind you and be proactive and say, let's meet a couple times a year, whether it's phone, Skype, person, it doesn't matter, but let's meet a couple times a year and let's ask those questions. Let's find out. Let's set out that plan and find out what's really going on in this person's life, instead of finding out when you come to me next tax season, oh, by the way, I did X, Y, Z. It's like, oh, really? I wish you would have told me.
Right.
So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, one of your first books, and you have multiple books, but one of your previous books before this one was The 10 Most Expensive Tax Mistakes, that basically is for the general public. Now, why did you decide to do something for physicians? Because you have one for the general public, you have one for entrepreneurs. What's so special about doctors?
Well, doctors, I think, struggle more than your average just basic entrepreneur does. I know in medical school, you guys aren't taught anything about how to operate a business, how to run a business, how to market that business, how to set your books up so you can record everything. You're not taught that stuff. And so I think you come out of medical school and you come out of your residency and all that with a big challenge in front of you, especially those of you that want to be self-employed, be 1099 doctors.
Oh, yeah.
How do you even set this up? I know how to do medicine, but I don't necessarily know how to do the other part. And so I just think there's such a huge need out there based on the doctors that I've been working with. So I just felt like it was time for us to stop and take some time and really start paying attention to the medical community.
And this is a really easy read book. I mean, this book is, I'm looking at it right now. I've finished it already, but it's basically about 78 pages. So it's a really quick and easy read.
Nice and short, easy. And the good thing about it is you don't have to read it in order. You can just grab a chapter. It's like, ooh, what is this? This pertains to me. The next one doesn't. And you can just pick and choose the chapters that you're interested in, as opposed to traditional books where you can't just grab, one or two chapters out of there.
Okay. Well,
in one of my...
Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
In one of my other books called Stop Overpaying Your Taxes, I devote a whole chapter to various business deductions, and that's chapter 5 in that book. And in there is a section on various expenses for medical professionals, because so many people, they're not even aware of all the kinds of things that can be deducted in their business. And you guys truly have a business, whether you really think of it as a business or not. By default, you have a business if you're not getting a W-2.
Okay, so this show, obviously, Docs Outside the Box, we're focusing on, expanding our lives and doing things that are outside the scope of a hospital, or just doing things in a non-traditional way. So a lot of times the way in which that person will get paid is as a 1099 or as an independent contractor. So, you just mentioned before that, there are a lot of deductions that physicians leave on the table. Can you describe some of them, some of the deductions that we leave on the table that, we really should be going back and saying, that's something that we should be mentioning to our CPAs or to our tax professional?
Right. I'm going to go down just my quick little list of doctors and other medical professionals in that chapter 5 of the Stop Overpaying Your Taxes. Things like an answering service. If you have to invest in somebody like that to help you while you're at the hospital or while you're on duty, your advertising and your marketing, your accounting and your tax prep and your tax coaching fees, business cards, brochures.
Wait. So if I get
conferences,
if I get my taxes prepared, if I work with you, that's all tax deductible?
you got it. Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Keep going. You got me.
Yes. Conferences and seminar fees. If you're out there attending various things, or if you're subscribing and something has a fee associated with it, and it is to help you build your practice into the business. If you have to rent a piece of equipment for some reason, those are deductible. Things that would take up maybe a home office, like file cabinets, and your cell phone can be a deduction. Your computer, internet, lab fees, legal fees, licenses and permits, what you might need to operate within various areas, meals and entertainment. If you're taking credit cards to accept payments, those that are in more of an office type situation, your merchant fees that you're being charged, your bank fees that you're being charged.
Because there's a bunch of listeners who are in concierge medicine, and obviously they get paid, not from reimbursements from insurance because they don't take insurance, but obviously through credit cards. So the merchant fees are reimbursable for them. Okay. Wow.
You bet. Yes, deductible for them.
Now,
office supplies, office equipment.
Now, what before we go too much into that, what exactly is a deduction? What does that mean? Like, does that mean like I don't pay taxes on said item? Explain that for us.
Okay, there's deductions and there's credits on a tax return. A deduction is something that gets an expense that gets subtracted from your income. And so depending on what your tax rate is, so I'm going to use 25%, though I'm sure you're higher than that, but that's easy math. So if you're at the 25% tax rate and we have a $100 deduction, it will save you $25 in tax. Okay. So it's not a dollar for dollar, where if you have a credit like maybe the child tax credit or some type of a credit like that, that's an actual dollar for dollar deduction. But deductions are actually depending on what your tax rate is. Okay. So they're still good, and we like to really make sure that we're not missing any of them. Because they can really make a huge difference.
Absolutely. Now, one thing with a lot of the listeners also is, a lot of them do locums. A lot of them are W-2 employees who want to kind of transition to that 1099 life, So what is and why is there a difference between, what everybody talks about, which is the S Corp, as well as an LLC? Can you tell us about that? Because a lot of people have been talking about that, and I think a lot of people don't know specifically what those things mean.
Right, and the waters can get really muddy around those two entity types. I'm going to start with the LLC. Okay. The LLC is a wonderful planning entity, in my opinion, because an LLC is a hybrid entity. In a state that is an LLC-friendly state, because LLC is governed by state, not federal. So in an LLC-friendly state, an LLC can act like a sole proprietor. It can act like an S Corp. It can act like a C Corp. Or if you and I decide to do an LLC together, it can act like a general partnership. So you have a lot of flexibility on how this one entity can act. And that makes it a great planning tool versus an S Corp can only be an S Corp. So the reason you hear a lot about S Corps is you're able to shelter a certain amount of your income from self-employment tax. And that is in comparison to a sole proprietor or a single member LLC, where 100% of that income up to the maximum Social Security level is subject to self-employment tax. And so that's the beauty of an LLC. It can act like that S Corp without having to issue stock and without having to have those annual shareholder meetings and board of directors meetings and stuff that is required for an S Corp. So that's one of the reasons I like an LLC, and I happen to live in a state that's very LLC friendly. Now, not all states are LLC friendly, so before you jump out and say, I need to go do an LLC, we need to find out if you live in an LLC friendly state or not. But an S Corp will give you the same basic perks that an LLC being taxed as an S Corp will give you, in that it's that sheltering of that income from the self-employment tax, which is most of the time will save thousands of dollars on your tax return. But an S Corp does require you to issue stock and to have annual meetings and to have a board of directors and some of those more on the legal side of things. Both of them help to give you limited liability protection, which is huge in your world. You want to limit that. You want to put that fence around yourself so that something that might happen in your medical life doesn't transfer over to your personal life. And I'm not an attorney, and I can't give legal advice, but that is huge for a lot of industries, and yours is at the very top of that industry, I would think.
Okay, so let me ask you this question, Diane, then. I know what I'm going to ask you is a very it's a blanket type statement. You need more detail, but I just want to get your opinion. Someone is coming out, they want to be a locums. They want to work for themselves and what have you. In that type of situation where they go from hospital to hospital, they, are just the usual locums type of person. Would you recommend that they do an S Corp, or do you recommend that they do an LLC, or do you just need more information before you're able to make that type of recommendation?
I would definitely need more information. And in the case of my own clientele, I try to do a pretty thorough analysis, and then it's up to the client to make the ultimate decision. I can recommend. But it depends, again, on the state that they're in. And I know from talking to attorneys around my state in Idaho, that in Idaho, an LLC actually gives you more liability protection than an S Corp does.
What?
So then
Really?
if somebody was in Idaho, really? And so I might say, okay, let's start you as an LLC, and then let's get permission from the IRS to be taxed as an S Corp, so that we build that stronger fence around you for liability reasons. So there's a lot of research and information that needs to go into that answer, depending on where the person lives and where they're offering their services.
Okay. All right. Good answer then. Good answer. Well, let's go through a couple of scenarios, and these scenarios are basically to elicit what's more preferable, to be a W-2 employee or to be a 1099 or independent contractor. So you ready to do this?
I'm ready.
All right. So scenario number one is we have a 35-year-old female. She's a neurosurgeon. She has over $350K in student loan debt, which we're all starting to learn is pretty typical for nowadays for a med student or for someone who wants to be a physician. But they are working in locums. They're in that 1099 life, and she is making over $500,000 in locums. She is not employed, obviously. How does she maximize her tax situation? What are some key things that she can do to make her tax situation a lot better?
Well, one of the first things we would do would be to prepare that entity analysis. Because in that entity analysis, then we can look and see, is she in the right entity that's going to give her not only the best liability protection, but the most tax savings? So that's one thing I would look at. The next I would look at is actually the whole concept of tax planning, because through tax planning, we're going to come up with all these deductions and stuff that she's potentially doesn't know that she can take. So we'd want to really get into her business and her personal life. And I know from working with you, I've asked you a lot of what probably came across as personal questions because I was digging for things that could be deductible.
Right.
That you're paying for in your personal life that you didn't even realize that maybe we could transfer that over and actually make it a business deduction.
Like
I'm
my
always
cell phone?
looking for yet. Or like we were talking about hiring your wife
Yes.
to work in your actual business that you're running, instead of her staying as a W-2 employee where she was for the hospital.
Right.
Little conversations we've had that way, but to do that, I had to kind of ask some personal life type questions to be able to make that happen. So we would look at some of those kinds of areas. Then I would want to be looking at her as far as some retirement planning. She's probably still fairly young, and that may not be important to her, but it becomes important in the long term. If we can save some money now on taxes, then sometimes that becomes a determining factor on whether they can, quote, afford to make that contribution into a retirement plan or not. But you can if I can drop that tax rate down for you. So we look at a lot of those little areas on ways that we can set her up to save a bunch of tax on her tax return.
And she should not be contacting you literally like 2 days before April 15th, I'm assuming, right?
Oh, yeah. Like now, not after the end of the year.
Got you. All right. Well, let's contrast that situation with a 35-year-old male neurosurgeon. He's making the same amount. He's making over $500,000, but his situation is he's not locums. He's employed by the hospital. He's getting that W-2. How does someone like him maximize his tax situation?
He doesn't have near the choices she has. Because he's a W-2 employee, he may be able to contribute to some sort of a retirement plan, whether it's a 401k or a 403b or something along those lines, and I would strongly encourage them to do that. Their other option is more in the charitable realm, where they can increase their charitable contributions, but that's hard to do when you're paying off a ton of student loan debt.
Tell me about it.
There's just not a whole lot you can do when somebody's a W-2 employee. It takes away, it just kind of almost ties my hands on the tax planning side.
Okay. Now, let's say all things being equal, and this is a play type of situations. All things being equal, in general, if we were to roll the dice or if we were to play this scenario and the probabilities, in general, just so we know, who ends up usually paying more in taxes in this type of situation, this scenario? Is it the one who's employed, or is it the one who is working as a locums?
The one who's employed will ultimately pay more tax, only because the one who is working as locums and getting a 1099 has more planning abilities, has more flexibility. It may feel like you're paying more tax, because when you are a W-2 employee, your employer, the hospital or whoever's employed you, is paying half of that Social Security and Medicare tax that we get to pay in when we're self-employed. And so it might feel like you're paying more tax at the beginning, but once we can get into some really true tax planning, you actually will pay a lot less in the long run.
It's funny you mentioned that. The reason I'm laughing is because that's... No, but it's funny you mentioned that, because that's what I thought initially. I was like, man, Diane, why am I paying so much in taxes right now? But then when you go back and you look at the end of the year, you're like, oh, yeah, I actually am paying less taxes compared to when I was employed, and it's funny because I was just like, am I saving money or am I paying more in taxes? But you're right. You really do end up paying a little bit less in our situation. I can't say, in our situation, that was. And
in most situations, not all, but in most situations, if you're able to take advantage of the various strategies that are sitting there, the IRS has built all of these wonderful strategies into the tax code, but so few people are really aware of them. There's not a whole lot of people out there really pushing the tax planning side of the accounting industry. And so because of that, you don't hear as much about it as I would like you to be hearing about it. And so sometimes I get a little bit of resistance when I throw out a tax strategy to somebody, And in reality, it will save them a ton of money if they can just have enough trust to know that I do know what I'm talking.
Diane, you are coming
Come
with
out
the
at the
knowledge. You're coming with the knowledge, and you're coming with the segues, because that is a great point that you mentioned. So, look, reading your book, to me, it looks like the tax code was written to have basically the IRS wants people to do a certain type of behavior. And if you do that type of behavior, you're going to be rewarded with, tax deductions, a lower tax burden. Am I correct in having that type of thought process?
Yes, you're 100% correct. Yep. As long as we play the game according to all the little things they've laid out there for us, we reap the benefits. But most people aren't aware of all the rules of this game, and so they're giving what I call a huge tip to the IRS. We all need to pay our fair share of tax. No, I'm not saying don't pay tax, but we don't need to leave it such a big tip on the table for them.
And now, a word from our sponsor. Understanding how to run a business in medicine will put you at a unique advantage in the future. Whether it's leading a hospital, practice, or starting a new venture, the Physician CEO program will put you in focus from day one. Physician CEO is an accelerated business immersion program developed by MBA faculty from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. The Physician CEO program provides an intensive MBA-style education made up of modules, with each module covering topics from leadership to entrepreneurial ventures. Because of their individualized structure, each participant leaves the program with their 1, 3, and even 5-year business plan, all designed to function in the real world. If you're a physician who is looking to start your own venture, lead your practice or department, or even start planning for succession out of medicine, then you can't afford to miss this opportunity. Class is filling up. The 2018 program begins this January. Learn more at www.physician-ceo.com/DOTB. Okay. Well, without giving away too much of the book, because obviously you want people to read it, you want people to get out there and buy the book. Can you discuss 3 tax mistakes that you think medical professionals are making right now? And what do you recommend? What are your recommendations to fix those mistakes?
Well, the very biggest mistake that I see is a complete and total lack of planning. It's that bringing your stuff to your accountant, to your tax preparer, maybe it's middle of March or end of March, 1st of April, whatever it might be, and saying, here, work your magic, which is what I hear that all the time from people. I hope your crystal ball's working. And versus sitting down with somebody who will proactively lay out a plan, help you implement it, or even implement pieces of it for you, and be there right beside you, coaching you all along the way, making sure that as you make changes in life, that is reflected in this plan, updating it constantly, and saving you thousands and thousands, and ultimately probably over $1 million in tax, just because you realize the need for planning, which is what unfortunately most doctors don't even understand that concept, because it's something that's so foreign. You guys are all into the service end of helping your patients and stuff, and the thought of having to lay out a plan for yourself, I think that's just a foreign concept. And so that's probably the biggest thing that I see. The next one would be looking at the entity type. I run across doctors who are operating as sole proprietors, and it just scares me to death because they didn't realize how much liability they had hanging out there when they did that. Mm-hmm. And so making sure that we don't have any doctors operating as sole proprietors, that's such a scary thought because you could lose everything. Okay. So, looking at that entity type, and then looking at the retirement side of things. Those are probably the 3 biggest areas, because my goal is that when you hit retirement time, you have this nice nest egg sitting there. You've got a plan. You and Renee are kicking back, enjoying life a little bit because you've worked so hard to get there. And you're not
kicking
one
back
of
a
these
little
doctors.
Bit. We're going to be kicking back hard.
Yeah, because I know there's. Well, I don't think you have an off button.
Well, not yet.
Okay. But I don't want you or any of the other doctors I work with to ever be somebody who's had to claim bankruptcy at late in life, or they've lost everything because they've gotten in upside down in debt because they started accumulating the toys before they should have, and the multiple homes and the things like that, and just living out of debt, because that's a terrible way to live. It's so stressful. So if we can help them build a solid plan and pay for that stuff with tax savings, it's a much better way to go.
Got you. Now, so obviously, how about this? What's the biggest mistake that independent doctors are making when they switch over to that 1099 life?
I would say it would be not finding a proactive tax planning type accountant to sit down and talk with right up front.
Oh, wow.
Here's what do I need to know?
So
what are my pitfalls?
Tax planning
what
is big. Tax planning is really big then. Wow.
It is, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because if I can save you, say $1 million over your lifetime in taxes, that's huge.
That's true. Yeah. Wow. Now, do you think, because obviously, there's going to be people out there who are saying, I can do this myself. I can, I don't know, I'll put more towards retirement, or I'll just deduct more. Like, what do you say to people like that? Like, do you really recommend getting a professional, or do you think like TurboTax is the way to go for most people? Because that's what I was using, before I started becoming an attending. I would just use TurboTax as a med student, and, that was okay for me. What do you say to people who talk like that?
Well, if all you have is a W-2, and maybe you own your home or some things like that, you're probably fine with something like TurboTax or H&R Block or those kind of people. But if you've become locums, or you have a specialty practice, or whatever it might be, to where you are self-employed and you're not getting a W-2, in my professional opinion, you should be working with an accounting professional, because you're most definitely leaving money on the table, and you're not aware of all the pitfalls that are out there. And I'll just give you an example. I was working with a podiatrist recently, whose tax preparer, I'm hoping will soon to be his previous tax preparer, was not deducting his rent payments that he was making to himself for the building that he owned, that his practice was operating in. So he owns a building, rents it to his practice. That person did not pick up those rent payments as an expense on his business return. But then on his personal return, that person picked up all of that payments or rent as rental income on the personal return. So he didn't get the deduction on the business side, income on the personal side. So that I see those kinds of mistakes all the time with people that are trying to maybe do it themselves, or they've gone cheap and they went with the cheapest tax preparer they could find instead of going for quality. And those types of mistakes can cost somebody.
You brought it up then, Diane. I didn't bring it up. So then how is it that, since you wanted to step into that, how is it that the listeners right now, obviously you can't work for everybody, even though it'd be great if, you had everybody in the United States as your client. But how do physicians, med students, or whoever who's listening to the show, how do they find a competent, adequate tax preparer, someone who's going to do the job right for them?
That's a really, 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 really good question, and I'm glad you asked it. I always say that finding an accountant, finding a tax preparer is a lot like dating. You need to get to know them. You need to find out, what do they stand for? You need to find out what type of information are they putting out there to the public. Do they have a blog? Are they being interviewed on programs? Have they written books or anything like that? You want to find somebody who understands the medical profession, somebody who understands self-employed people, because you're both when you're a self-employed physician, somebody who understands what it means to lay out for the future, who's got a tax planning bent to their business and is not just recording the history and happy to do that. So there's a lot of things you need to look for. And I think if you Google the word tax coach, and then maybe your local area or whatever, you'll probably come up with several accountants that come up under that term. I myself belong to a group of about 500 accountants across the United States, where we're all certified tax coaches, and that allows you the ability to find somebody in your area. But I do work nationwide, and so I'm happy to work with people outside of my state, just like you and I work together.
Right. Now, what are some things that people should be like, I don't know, I need to watch out for this person?
really watch if the accountant is not somewhat entrepreneurial, because they might be too conservative. Just so conservative that all they do is just record the numbers and they don't go any further. They're not willing to look at things and have those conversations. Those are very dangerous accountants. And then making sure that they have a good level of review in their office. A lot of these tax returns that I come across that are just so outrageously wrong, it's a single tax person that just has just an office with one person in it, so nobody's reviewing their work. Or they may have an office with a couple people in it, but they don't have a strong review process to where another one or two more sets of eyes looks at everything that goes out the door, to making sure that, is this right legally by law, according to the IRS code? And then the next level of review is, does it make sense for what I know about this client? Does it make sense on your tax return if something was really bizarre? Like when I first picked you up, we had some bizarre stuff on your tax return. And I went, there's no way this makes sense. It's just not logical. So you want to make sure that they've got a good level of review and that they're looking out, they're proactively wanting to meet with you and have those. Some of them, sometimes they're pretty tough discussions that need to be held.
Now, I always got to show the medical students and even the residents some love. It's not just all about, the attending. So is there any room for med students, for residents to see meaningful gains in their taxes by working with a tax coach? What's your thoughts on that?
That one's a little harder because they don't have the flexibility, and they have a huge load of debt on their shoulders. So that means they more than likely don't have a lot of available cash for making some big contributions into a retirement plans and some things like that. It never hurts to start establishing the relationship. And even if you're not quite ready for tax planning, aligning yourself with an accountant or a tax preparer who is known for their tax planning abilities, you're going to need it, and you're going to be a prime candidate.
Okay. Well, we're getting towards the end of our interview, and I got some quick, fast questions for you. I'm going to ask you some questions. You just let me know the first thing that comes off the top of your head, okay?
Okay.
All right. So what's one thing you want listeners to get from this podcast?
The importance of being proactive about their taxes, and don't leave a big tip for the IRS or for Uncle Sam.
Okay. All right.
That was
good
two,
one.
sorry.
No, that's perfect. All right. So you mentioned that obviously in my business, my wife is an employee of the business. But, everybody hears this concept of you can employ your 7-year-old, son or cousin or what have you. Is that true? Like, can I really employ like my 7-year-old cousin and get a tax deduction based off of that?
Maybe. It depends. So it depends on if we can find things within your business that a 7-year-old can really do. In the medical profession, maybe. In some other professions, most definitely. I've got several clients that are using their children to do shredding in their office, water the plants, do some light cleaning. Sometimes they're using them in their marketing. They're using pictures and photos of the kids, so then they're able to pay them for that type of work. So, yeah, it depends. Maybe.
Okay. All right. So this next section, it's part of the quick, fast questions, but it's something I want to introduce. It's something that's called It's All Good, like you're good, or you're going to get audited. So I'm going to give you some scenarios, and then you just answer it as, it's all good, or you know what, you're going to get audited. So you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. So my business just bought me a Tesla.
It could be good. It depends on a lot of things. It depends on are you how much traveling you're doing from hospital to hospital to hospital. So maybe it depends.
Okay. All right. So let's say I go to Vegas. I meet up with some friends. They're from they're near the Vegas area, and we're staying at like the nicest hotels. We're eating the nicest of foods, and I talk to them about my locums company. I say, hey, look, you guys should join, blah, 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 da, 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 let's do this. And, one of them ends up joining, one of them does not. Can I deduct the entire trip?
Possibly. My question would be, as your tax planning accountant, did you set up that appointment ahead of time? Did we have it on your calendar so that the trip was specifically to meet with your friends? Or you were there, and while you were there, you decided to call your buddy? It makes a huge difference.
Well,
You're going to put it on your
just
calendar.
So everybody and just so everybody knows, this is not me. This is just a friend of mine. So.
Right, but I'm
Okay.
just saying, but if you and I were having this conversation, it would be, it's on your calendar ahead of time. You set up the appointment. Now you go to Vegas. You meet with them. That was the sole reason for being there. While you're there, you got to enjoy the other stuff, but your main reason for being there was that, so that we could deduct as much of that trip as we possibly could.
Okay, then let's play that game then. Let's say, for example, I set up this appointment a month in advance. I talk to my buddy he's a general surgeon in the Arizona area, and I say, look, on July such and such, let's meet in Vegas. Let's spend a weekend together, and let's talk business, but also at the same time, let's have fun. And, we talk over dinner. We go to, have fun and do what people do in Vegas. How does that work? And then now I come back and I talk to you. How does that conversation go?
Well, then we start looking at, okay, you set it up ahead of time. This is sounding more like a pre-planned appointment. So then we look at the total number of days that you were there. And let's say you just had one or two conversations with him, and they were at the beginning, the first day or two. And then the rest of the days you guys were just having fun together. So then we could write off your airfare to and from getting to Las Vegas. Nice. And then we would have to look at the hotel, and more than likely we would write off the couple days that you met with him, but not the rest of it.
Okay. And
then we look at who all did you bring with you? Was it just your wife, or was it several other family members who were coming on this working vacation? And then we start allocating the cost of meals. How much of that can we deduct? And the deductible portion are the meals where you're actually meeting with your buddy that you're talking to about joining your locums group. So you kind of have to break it down, and piece by piece by piece by piece, all the different places that you spent money on, and determining, is it deductible, and if so, how much of it can we deduct?
Okay, that was good. That was a really good educational answer. I love it. And tell us a little bit about your company, and ultimately, we want to know, how can we get in touch with you? What's the website, the email address? Give us all of that information so that my listeners can get in contact with you.
Okay, my website is www.taxcoachforyou.com, and we use the number 4, so taxcoach, the number 4, YOU.com. Out there, you'll find all kinds of free information, lots more interviews that I've done with other podcast hosts. You'll find the list of all my books. Most of them we give away for free. We just charge shipping and handling on them to help cover our costs for getting them in your hands. I love to offer what we call a free tax analysis, where we'll take a look at your last couple of years' personal and or business returns, whatever you might have, and just see, can I spot some tax savings on them? If, either way, whether I can or I can't, I hop on either phone or Skype with you, and we have a little conversation about, here's what I've seen. Either you're doing a great job and we give you an attaboy or an attagirl and keep on going, or we have the conversation of, here's what I think is missing. And then we can determine if we feel comfortable moving forward and working with each other, and take it from there. So we love to do those free tax analysis.
Well, Diane, this was an amazing podcast episode. I really enjoyed our conversation. I think the audience, the listeners, are going to learn a lot from you. And I'm sure you're going to get some clients from this conversation. So thank you once again for being on the show. I know you're really busy. I know this is a busy time with you. So thank you so much for taking a small portion of time and working with us and talking with us about taxes and how you can reduce your tax burden.
You're very welcome, and thank you for having me on your program, because I've been watching you as you got this thing up and going and all the excitement you had, and it's pretty incredible to watch what you're doing out there as you're helping other doctors.
And that's a wrap. Man, that was a lot of information in here. I hope you all got so much out of this. I hope you all kept notes also. But listen, I'm going to be doing my first giveaway ever. I'm serious. So I'm going to be giving away 10 copies of Diane Gardner's book, the 10 most expensive tax mistakes that cost medical professionals thousands. Listen, this giveaway, since it's my first one, this one is only available to those in the United States. I know the listeners, I have listeners in other countries, but trust me, the ones in the future, I will include you all in it. But this one is only available to those in the United States. So listen, this is only with Twitter and Instagram, so listen carefully. With Twitter and Instagram, all you have to do is just at me, which is DocsOTB with Twitter. And then with Instagram, it's at NIIP as in Paul, DARKO. And just tell me one quick thing that you learned from this show. And make sure you use the hashtag I'm not just a doc, okay? So use Twitter and IG, at me, which is on Twitter, at DocsOTB. On Instagram, it's at NIIP Darko. Let me know quickly one thing that you learned from the show, and make sure you use the hashtag I'm not just a doc. I'll choose 10 users either via Twitter or Instagram. It doesn't matter. And make sure you turn on your DM, all right, so that I can reach you, because as we all know, as everyone knows, it goes down in the DM. So look, I'll catch you on the next episode. But before I jet, remember one thing. We only got one life. Let's make it count and live outside the box. Peace.